So the one and only far-right conservative commentator Ben Shapiro responded to one of my TikTok videos where I explain why the Bible doesn't actually condemn LGBT people or our relationships. I'm going to break down his argument for you to set the record straight that, once again, the Bible does not condemn LGBT people and our lives and love.
Leviticus 18:22. Man, I don't mean to be didactic about this, but it's like right there. Anyway, continue.
That begins with Leviticus 18:22. A man shall not lie with a man as with a woman, for this is an abomination. On the surface, that seems clear, a prohibition against gay sex, but you have to take in consideration the cultural context and the literary context. Leviticus 18 begins with verses 1 and 2. God says to the people of Israel, do not be like the Egyptians, which I'm bringing you out from, or the Canaanites, to which I'm bringing you to. These are pagan cultures, and you should stay faithful to me and me alone. In other words, the list of prohibitions in Leviticus 18 are about fidelity to God and to the rituals and culture that God has established, keeping the Israelites pure from the Canaanites and the Egyptians' paganism. So you have to ask the question, where in ancient Canaan or in Egypt did men lie with men as with women? And the answer is twofold, either in the context of idolatry, meaning that as sacrifices to gods and goddesses of sex, people would often have sex with temple prostitutes to appease the gods and goddesses, and this would be heterosexual sex and homosexual sex. It was related to idolatry. It wasn't about the gender. Second, in ancient cultures, you had two forms of sexual exploitation. One was called pederasty, where older men would use younger boys as a means of passing on wisdom, but it was actually sexual exploitation from the view of the Israelites. Or in ancient cultures, if you had been colonized and conquered, men were able to have sex with other men of colonized nations, and it was not considered wrong or sinful. In Leviticus 18, it is called an abomination. Those are pagan practices, and the Israelites are called not to engage in such bad behavior.
People are condemning sin. When the Bible has an entire list of sexual sins, and it includes among those what's called in Hebrew mishkav zachar, lying with a male is one would lie with a female in Leviticus, the text is clear. Now, you may not like the text, you may not agree with the text, but the hijacking of the text to pretend it means something that it clearly does not is very silly.
Ben is claiming that the text is clear and that it's a list of sexual prohibitions. That's simply inaccurate. Leviticus 18 is a list of cultural and ritual prohibitions. In fact, the verse right before verse 22 says, do not sacrifice your child to Molech. That's not a sexual prohibition. It's about ritual. It's about idolatry. It's about paganism. It's not about sexuality.
You don't get to hijack biblical text and pretend it says something that it absolutely does not. That is a violation of taking God's name in vain.
The real taking of God's name in vain here is Ben acting like a biblical scholar, taking a text out of its literature and cultural context and using it to justify his own homophobia and transphobia. The best scholarship says at least that this text is not precise, it is not clear, and I believe scholarship points to this text not referring to modern, loving, consensual same-sex relationships at all.